Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was Beren and Luthien. Join us as we explore Tolkien and all the ages of Middle-earth with your hosts from theonering.com, Jonathan Watson and Michael Grumbine.
It's a special day today here at Exploring Tolkien. And that would be because we're not doing a half chapter today. We're doing a whole chapter. At least
we're picking up the game, boys.
That's kind of the intention. I hope that we can do that. I hope that we won't be here for 2 hours. In fact, we can't be. So we'll get through it all. But it's good to see you again, Michael. It's been a couple weeks.
It has, and I have things happening at the house. So I apologize to our viewers, but getting my second child married in a few days here. So by the time this comes out, she will have been married.
Wow. And so, how did you go about setting up the relationship? Did you go and find the guy for her?
Right. Yes. Arranged marriage.
Matchmaker type of thing that you tend to like to. No.
They met on online classes, actually.
Whoa! What the? Well, that is very 21st century. That makes sense.
Yeah. It was not the intention of the online class, but some of my kids have been homeschooled over the years for a certain number of years. She was only homeschooled 2 years, but in those 2 years, she met her now fiance, who lives in Pennsylvania.
Man, that's 2 out of 16. Is that right? How many?
Something like that.
About?
Yeah.
Something like that. No. I'm glad you're blazing the trail for me. I still have a number of years to go before that actually happens. So tell her congrats for us.
I can be a cautionary tale. So.
No, this is a successful thing. This is not caution. This is a good thing. We need more well-established, moral Christian folks making babies and families.
Yeah, and my children are full on that one.
Good. So when do we get to call you Grandpa? In
views?
10
I don't know. So my first married daughter is going to arrive tomorrow afternoon. So who knows? I might get some news, maybe not, but we'll see.
Crazy. All right. Well, let's jump into this here, guys. First of all, we are finally getting through this. I looked. We have about 100 pages left in the book, or so.
Getting
so
close.
That means we're about 3/4 of the way through. We've been doing this for more than a year, but I mean, we've had a lot of things get in the way, like the Rings of Power, like Tales of the Shire, all the great Tolkien stuff in the world. Wait, that sucks. I just realized how big of a problem that is.
Well, I'm just enjoying The Hobbit and its vibe, because after this, I think we're going to do some more Peter Jackson changes in the movies, but then we're going to go to Turin.
Children of Hurin. That'll be great.
Children of Hurin, and that'll be a totally different vibe.
Yeah, but I like that. It's like it gives us the the edges of the bell curve for Tolkien, right? The Hobbit is one side, Turin's at the other side.
Genuine children's story, all the way to a genuine tragic tale.
Nearly R-rated. Well, pretty much R-rated. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Would be if we made it into a movie.
I think it's pretty solidly R-rated, given
for
a
sure.
whole bunch of things.
All right, so and so this chapter, before we dive into it completely and we get into our Hobbit fact, this chapter does deal a lot with the Arkenstone, and so we're going to spend a little extra time talking about that, because some people have made at our extended podcast, which you can get to by going to theonering.com/members. It's $4 a month. First month is free, guys. Join up, and we'll talk about that also in our monthly chat, which is, when is it this month? I can't remember. I think it's on the 15th. So if you hear this, 2 weeks, 15th or 22nd. I don't have the calendar right in front of me, but if you hear this, guys, join up, and you can just join us for a month and get the calendar. And here's the other cool thing I'll tell you about. I've been building an app for the website, for the podcast, for all this sort of stuff. So we're going to have, probably in October at some point, it will be released, and you'll be able to get it, and you'll be able to see, if you're a member, you should be able to log in and get the extended podcast. You can get the regular podcast on the app. You'll be able to get all the news, all the images. Like, we're going to do an Art of the Day. I'm going to have a Tolkien calendar, which, like, all the things that happened on this day in Middle-earth.
Wow.
Which, I don't know how complete it's going to be when it launches, but it will be kept getting added to, and I've got a list of like 500 things.
There'll be something to build on anyway.
Yeah, so look for that. But it'll be even better for people who are members of and support us. So go to theonewing.com/member, become a member, or become a sponsor like Lynn and Rich, who help us and go above and beyond the call to keep us going. Or you can go to theonewing.com/Patreon too. All right. So let's get into our
Hobbit facts.
Okay, so Michael, did you know, this sounds so repetitive every time I say this, that the Arkenstone is actually an original word that's connected to the Silmarils? Literally connected to the Silmarils. So in the earliest work that Tolkien did on what he called the Annals of Valinor, in the entry, let's see if I get this right, for the year 2500, he had an Old English version of how Fëanor crafted the gems. This is in the Histories of Middle-earth 4. Is that the Peoples of Middle-earth? I can't remember. Do you remember what? Come on, give me the Histories of Middle-earth 4 is. I don't remember this at all. There are so many titles. I want to give it to you guys. The 4 is the Shaping of Middle-earth. Well, I got the of Middle-earth part. It's the Shaping of Middle-earth. The Peoples is like the last one. Yeah, it's.
I was going to say the Peoples is way later.
Yeah, sorry. See, I knew it was of Middle-earth something. So he actually wrote in Old English a version of how Fëanor crafted the gems.
Right. I read that so long ago, like back in my teenage years.
So if you look, it's in Appendix 1. In my copy here, it's page 289. It says it's a fragment of a translation of the Quenta Noldorinwa into Old English made by Elfwine or Ariel. Ariel's the character in the Book of Lost Tales who meets up with the elves there and gets all their stories, together with Old English equivalents of the name. So I could try and speak this. I had an Old English, Middle English class a couple decades ago in college. But I have the translation, so I'll read it to you in Old English. This will be fun. Can't get AI to do it for me. And then I'll read the translation.
AI is not old
and you'll
enough.
see. Yeah, and you'll see where the Arkenstone, where the word Arkenstone actually came from. All right. This is going to sound crazy. Whoa. Okay. Her thurk searu kraftas athutan and beworktan thanoldi elva gimmas this is hard, misenliche Fëanor noldena chlavord workte tha Silmarils that waran eorklan stanas. That's tough. I'd
Pretty
have
good.
to really
Nicely
practice
done.
that a lot. But here the last word is eorklan stanas, or eorklan stanas. I think it's maybe like that, which sounds like Arkenstone. The Old English pronunciation, let me get that for you, or the translation of that is, here through cunning craft or artistic skill, the Noldor elves devised and created many gems, and Fëanor the Noldor Lord wrought the Silmarils that were precious holy stones, also known as Eorklanstanas or Arkenstones. So it was kind of transliterated into the word Arkenstones. And so we have this funky connection to where he got the word Arkenstone from, which is from the Silmarils. Now, why do we think those are from the Silmarils? Well, one, it has a light inside that Tolkien does speak of, and the Silmarils, of course, had a light inside. And so and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but I also want to bring up the point that in the original song, let me get to it here. In the original song that the dwarves sang in Bilbo's home about, far over the misty mountains cold, one of the lines is, the flowering stars, let's see, there many a gleaming hoard they shaped and wrought, and light they caught to hide in gems on hilt of sword, on silver necklaces they strung, the flowering stars on crowns they hung, the dragon fire in twisted wire, they meshed the light of moon and sun. And what did Fëanor take the light of, essentially, which is the same thing as the light of the moon and the sun, right? The light of the trees of Valinor. So the Arkenstones have a direct connection to the Silmarils. Now, are they Silmarils? We'll talk about that in our extended podcast, because there's a lot of discussion about if there are Silmarils, which one is it? Because there can really be only one possibility. But we'll get into that in our extended podcast, which you can get to by going to theonewing.com/member. So Anything more to say about that? That was a lot of exposition about.
I'm looking forward to the extended podcast on that one. But it's really neat to watch Tolkien's crafting over time, and the connection between everything is connected and to the different elements in his story, and the fact that the dwarves would, therefore name their Arkenstone after a term which was first applied, at least adjacent to the Silmarils, if not part of that lore, is fascinating. There's another example of that: dwarves using a thing which has an elven root in this chapter, which is crom, which is an elven word apparently, but the dwarves still use it. So the fact that the dwarves even take their language from the elves or at least some of their language from the elves. We know they have their own language, but nevertheless they seem to use some words that the elves, or at least derived from what the elves did. So
cool. Yeah. All right. We're gonna get into that, guys. So join us there, and I bet we'll talk about it when we get together in our monthly chat in a couple weeks. That'll be interesting to hear what you guys think.
The light coming from gems is just such a Tolkien thing. He loves things that emit light.
Agreed. And well, no, we're gonna get into the Arkenstone later. Okay, I can't. I gotta stop. I gotta stop. Oh, and if you guys join us at the monthly chat, I will also show you how far the app has come and kind of give you a demo of it and get your feedback on what you think needs to be in there, stuff like that. So it'll be in a Zoom call. You'll get a link in there, and you can join. So go there, thewandering.com/member. All right, let's get into this chapter, chapter 13, Not at Home. Michael, would you do the honors and give us a brief overview of this chapter once more?
Sure. Yep. This chapter is fairly straightforward. We remember that at the end of last chapter, the dwarves and Bilbo were trapped at the top of the tunnel, or a little ways down from the top of the tunnel, as Smaug vented his rage upon the mountainside and destroyed everything and collapsed to the end of the tunnel, or at least that's what they think. So they sit there in darkness for what turns out, it feels like days and days. It turns out to be a day and a half. So they're in darkness for a day and a half. They finally are running out of air, as Tolkien says, and they're desperate. And so they end up trying to get out. They can't. The tunnel's collapsed above them, so they try to get out by going down into the dragon's lair. And they do so. The dwarves display their characteristic lack of courage by huddling at the bottom of the tunnel and sending in a hobbit and then only grudgingly coming after him when he first only grudgingly going to get torches, and then only grudgingly coming after him after his torch goes out. So Bilbo explores the dragon's hall, which is now completely dark, as in the light that you and I talked about that comes from the dragon is no longer there. So, but there's a tiny little light of white, and Bilbo, all alone, explores the hall and discovers that light comes from the greatest treasure of Erebor, the dwarf hold, which is the Arkenstone, and he pockets it. And then the dwarves rejoin him, not knowing that he's pocketed it, and they explore the halls. They become emboldened. They gather gems in their pockets and armor on their bodies and weapons, but they eventually, under Bilbo's direction, find their way out of the mountain. We're kind of given a picture of the wreckage from centuries ago that Smaug wrought upon the dwarves, still evident through the halls. And then they exit the mountain. They do find the front door, still no sign of Smaug, and take a long trek through the afternoon down into right before the broken bridge to the former town of Dale, the ruins of Dale, and they end up at a dwarf, after following another trail, end up at a dwarf outpost, a lookout post, and a little stone hewn room, actually a large room and a small room hewn from stone, guard room, and end up staying there. Again, they wonder mightily about the lack of Smaug, but and Dory is insistent that he feels the dragon watching them from the mountaintop. Turns out he is incorrect about that. But thus ends the chapter, with some of them going to sleep in the guard room and some of them discussing what could have possibly happened to Smaug.
It's almost like the whole chapter revolves really around Bilbo's decision of the Arkenstone, because I mean, in the sense it revolves around it in the sense like that's the one thing that really happens. It changes a lot, right?
Well, they escape, right? So they escape the mountain. That's one thing, and then the Arkenstone's the only non, like they had to get out of the mountain somehow.
Right.
So that was going to happen. I mean, because the book doesn't end at that point, so they're going to escape somehow, get out somehow. So it's the story of that, but you're right that the one thing of note that happens in this story of great note is the Arkenstone itself, which we're given a decent description of. And that Bilbo gets his famed mithril coat, which will make its way throughout the Lord of the Rings on Frodo.
But I mean, I guess the reason I say it weighs around, or it's the central point. I guess maybe it's the weightiest part of the chapter. It adds a lot of weight to the chapter because Bilbo is a burglar. That's the very first thing that Gandalf calls him. And this is his ultimate burgling moment.
It is.
And so anyway, before we get into that, let's start of what happens here, right? They are sitting in the darkness for what seems like days and days. I didn't look up for how long people think it is. But it's a while. It's a couple days, maybe 24, 36, day and a half. Yeah. So, and so they just sat there. I mean, that's some serious fear. Like they're just sitting there in silence and darkness, hoping that the dragon doesn't come back. It makes you wonder, what are they actually thinking? Because they only have one choice. They can't go back. They try the door after 36 hours, I guess, which took a while.
I can't imagine doing that. Like I don't know anyone that I think would stay there for 36 hours.
Yeah,
I guess
they are dwarves.
They are dwarves. You're right, and they're in a tunnel. So, and they imagine that leaving will be, guaranteed death. But 36 hours is a long time.
Yeah. Sorry, I decided to rewatch this section in the films, and it is so dramatically different. I forgot how much I hated it because you lose all of this tension. It becomes a slapstick action scene. The entire thing about it, and I just am so sad that you lose this. The dwarves huddled in fear because the dragon is such a danger, is such a monster, right? You lose that fear that they have. They're just aggressive, and they think they can take on the monster, and they're running, and they go across giant chasms and jump into large, unmelted skiffs of gold, and it's a very odd thing. But this scene alone, right? This scene. I hate that it's gone. Right? There are actually a few scenes in this chapter which I hate that they're gone in the movies. I literally think they made a very stupid decision to change it to what it was because it became not Tolkien. It became not The Hobbit. It became not these dwarves.
That's right.
One interesting phrase here right in the beginning of the chapter is, but somehow just when the dwarves were despairing, Bilbo felt a strange lightening of the heart as if a heavy weight had gone from under his waistcoat. Is this him either losing weight really fast, or is this the death of the dragon somehow being part of the zeitgeist of where the dwarves are? Zeitgeist is
we'll find out in the next chapter about the dragon's fate, which spoiler alert, we know Smaug dies, but I think this would be too long, right? This would be.
It seems that way to me too.
36 hours later, I don't think Smaug. It takes him 36 hours to fly to Lake Town.
So what would cause that then? What would cause just he like the thoughts of what his father used to say? It just came to him, or the lightning of the load?
I take it to be that sudden inspiration where you're sometimes when you're in a tough spot, and all of a sudden a hope just comes welling up in you. I ascribe it to grace, given my worldview, but I think that's just. I mean, and Bilbo has that role of providing that spark in the company, right? The dwarves are always glum and very material and earthy and pessimistic about things. They tend to be pessimistic about things, with certain rare exceptions, like the unrealistic optimism about how they're going to dispose of a dragon with 13 of them after all this time. But aside from that, the dwarves are pretty pessimistic, and Bilbo provides hope. In this case, Omdir, right? The earthly kind of hope, where he's like, let's do something about this. Let's actually go and see what's going on. And if we die, we die. But let's take a shot. And so he's showing himself to be the leader. And that's what happens when people lead: is they get the inspiration. They just, something wells up in their heart, and they do it.
It's almost as though once Bilbo has been wallowing in his Baggins side for too long, the Tookish side is saying, "No more. We're done. We got to make a move." It's sort of like there's a time limit to how long he can wallow in misery or wallow in despair or wallow in his need for his home before he actually takes action. Maybe that's the lightness that takes a hold of him. The heavy weight that's been gone is the the emotional need for home, and he realizes he can do something about it now. It's not just waiting.
Yeah, that's right. I like that. I'll go with that. The other thing that strikes me about this whole situation is how ridiculously petty the dwarves are. Like they come down. Bilbo goes out by himself. He encounters no dragon, and he needs a light. So he's yelling at them, "Get me a light! Get me a light!" And then finally they grudgingly go send Oin and Gloin back up to get a light, get torches, and then when they bring the torches back down, they just hand a torch to Bilbo, and then they all huddle in the entrance still. As to quote, as Thorin carefully explained, Mr. Baggins was still officially their expert burglar and investigator. I like how they just added on the investigator part. Like all of a sudden, your job description just increases because people don't want to do the job themselves. If he liked to risk a light, that was his affair. They would wait in the tunnel for his reports. So they sat near the door and watched. These guys are these creatures are so pathetic. Anyway.
I wonder, so, you mentioned the greed, right? The greed of the dragon, the greed of the dwarves. And it makes me wonder here that the only time that the dwarves gain courage or gain resolve is once they've witnessed the treasure.
Right.
And it's sort of like the whole idea, right? The whole dragon sickness that Peter Jackson so, I think, clumsily displayed in the film. So there's probably some truth to it, but perhaps not in the excessive way that he showed it in the films.
Right.
But here, the dwarves, they just hang back. It still makes you wonder, like, what was their freaking plan? What were they going to do? Was it just like, we got to do something, right? We're just going to go there. This is our home. That's it. We're just got to go. It's 13 of us. That's all that's left. Ride or die, boys.
Well, you're thinking like suicidal last moment of their lives.
It feels like it. Yeah.
Last journey of their lives. Just like 13 of us are going to go back. I have to think that Gandalf probably had a hand in this. Like he probably sensed that the time that this was the right thing to do. And there's no way for him to think that there's a realistic chance of killing a dragon. Gandalf doesn't know about the Black Arrow. He doesn't know about Bard. Yeah. So there's no realistic hope, no Omdir. So I got to think that Gandalf spurred them to it, or at least sparked in them, because he had some knowledge, some sense that it was the right time and that Providence would work things out, because that's what it takes, is just a ridiculous amount of Providence. And as Providence always does, the courage of those who are used by Providence, in this case, Bilbo, discovering the weakness of the dragon.
And it's Gandalf's role is to bring hope and courage to the peoples of Middle Earth, essentially, right? To draw them forward into the things that they have to do. And he does that in this. He knows that somehow, right? Providence, grace. He knows that these dwarves need a burglar. Why the word burglar? Not an investigator, not a companion, not a minstrel, but a burglar. And it's his burgling that ends up, turning the story here at the end and bringing the people together, essentially. Well, as we'll find out. So anyway, so he moves on and he does burgle something, which is the Arkenstone. Here's what Tolkien wrote. Ever as he climbed, the same white gleam had shone before him and drawn his feet towards it. Slowly it grew to a little globe of pallid light. Now as he came near, it was tinged with a flickering sparkle of many colors at the surface, reflected and splintered from the wavering light of his torch. At last he looked down upon it, and he caught his breath. The great jewel shone before his feet, of its own inner light. And yet, cut and fashioned by the dwarves who had dug it from the heart of the mountain long ago, it took all light that fell upon and changed it into 10,000 sparks of white radiance shot with glints of the rainbow. Suddenly Bilbo's arm went towards it, drawn by its enchantment. His small hand would not close about it, for it was a large and heavy gem. But he lifted it, shut his eyes, and put it in his deepest pocket. Interesting word, deepest pocket. Not just like, it's like he knew he was hiding it. So right away, we know he's not giving it to the dwarves. Now I am a burglar indeed, thought he, but I suppose I must tell the dwarves about it sometime. They did say I could pick and choose my own share, and I think I would choose this if they took all the rest. All the same, he had an uncomfortable feeling that the picking and choosing had not really been meant to include this marvelous gem, and that trouble would yet come of it. But he's burgling. What else is he supposed to burgle, right? He can't burgle all 15 billion pieces of gold and jewels and things like that. There's a process that he takes here, which is like, I'm going to burgle the thing that's most important to them, and we'll see where it goes from here. It's an interesting thing. He's stealing now, not only from Smaug, he's stealing from the dwarves.
Right. Well, that's exactly like, but he's shifted. Like, he was supposed to be burgling on behalf of the dwarves,
right?
And now he's shifted to burgling from the dwarves, which one can argue is a fairly significant moral shift, and not in a good direction. Interestingly enough, it works out in a way, but I don't think it works out because he did the right thing there in a certain sense. Do you find it reprehensible? Do you think it's a morally reprehensible decision to take the Arkenstone? Aside from the fact that the part it plays in the plot.
Right. I think it is the wrong thing to do. I think it is not the right thing to do. I think that this goes back to the greed, right? It touches all, especially when it's something so dramatic and beautiful. Just, I mean, the same way we think of like how the Silmarils affected like Thingol, right? It brought his kingdom down, his lust for the Silmarils. So in the same way, right, it brought the Hobbit from his need for his home to a need for this jewel. It switched. When all he wanted was get home and have breakfast, now all he wants is this here. Despite everything else in the mountain, he will take this over everything else, and maybe he'll tell them about it someday.
That's right.
But yeah, I feel like it's him making the wrong choice here now, or it's this greed, this overwhelming greed of this beautiful gem that influences him to do it.
Yeah, I think that two things can be true, right? It's both. I think he's definitely making the wrong choice. I think he is influenced by the treasure itself. I've heard people ask the question, do you think he's influenced by the ring at this point?
No.
I don't see any signs of that.
Yeah. The ring is not a malicious influence at this point in the story yet. Tolkien hadn't made it into that.
Right.
He does use the ring in order to get there, because he puts the ring on when he goes down one more time. Doesn't need it because the dragon's not there. But yeah, the more I look at it, the more like he does make the wrong choice based on the circumstances around him and the treasure around him, and it makes him the ultimate burglar in the story, but it makes the dwarves like a little courageous now. So here's what Tolkien wrote about that. The mere fleeting glimpses of treasures which they had caught as they went along had rekindled all the fire of their dwarvish hearts. And when the heart of a dwarf, even the most respectable, is wakened by gold and jewels, he grows suddenly bold, and he may become fierce. And so, like in the same way, right, Bilbo became bold. He just took it and put it into his deepest pocket. And the dwarves will now become bold. They've been sheepish. They've been cowering. They've been letting Bilbo direct their paths here as the investigator. And they become fierce now, and they go in and they start putting on their the armor and finding the jewels and the gold of old and the harps that Fili and Kili play. Right, they're very bold. They don't care. Like they don't know the dragon's gone at this point, but they play harps that resound throughout the entire cavernous, lonely mountain.
You got to think, if the dragon's anywhere in the vicinity, that dooms them, right? But they don't care.
Yeah.
They're rather fey in their attitude, where they're just there to do their thing. And it does seem almost like, and I know this is a little controversial, maybe it does seem almost like the dwarves were kind of made for treasure, Their whole existence revolves around it. They're emboldened by it, made passionate. Doesn't mean they're always going to do the right things with their passions, but they are like, that is the thing around which their entire existence revolves. Like this whole mountain kingdom, which fell to the dragon, had unreal amounts of treasure gathered in its bottom cellars, and it this is what the dwarves do. They collect treasure, and it enlivens them in some way, as we see from this. So it's a fascinating question to think about. Sort of, is Tolkien, he's tapping it, like this is a thing in ancient literature too, dwarves and treasure. It's always like, even in the Disney version of Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, they're gem miners, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so dwarves are always connected with treasure, and Tolkien seems to be taking and riding the reins and riding that horse onward in a way that's interesting.
It's the definition of who they are, right? Because this is what brings them to life. The way that Tolkien writes, as they lifted old treasures from the mound or from the wall and held them in the light, caressing and fingering them. That's, it's almost a little erotic, almost, right? The way he says it, it's like these are like these are precious to them. Which it is a sickness that makes them desire it so much. Now, it doesn't give them a plan on how to get rid of the dragon or do anything like that. They're just sort of like struck in awe, and they forget their fear, they forget their caution, and they just sort of like look around and enjoy everything for a little while. And this brings me to the second scene that I think is missed out by Peter Jackson's films, and that's Fili and Kili with the harps. Tolkien wrote this: Fili and Kili were almost in a merry mood, and finding still hanging there many golden harps strung with silver, they took them and struck them, and being magical, which is interesting, and also untouched by the dragon, who had small interest in music, they were still in tune. The dark hall was filled with a melody that had long been silent. And I thought, oh man, what like throughout the scenes of the dragon, the gold, and then you get this unearthly harp echoing through the chambers of the Lonely Mountain. And I thought that would have been just a wonderful scene in the films. It struck me as I read it this time. But we missed out, and we got big, giant, melted gold mechanisms that create huge statues of dwarves in rocks that were never used.
Yeah, that movie's such a travesty.
But anyway, I like that. I like the idea of Fili and Kili grabbing the harps first, too. It speaks to the character, too. But missed scene, in my opinion.
Well, they have youth. They have youth where music seems most appropriate in youth.
Yeah, and it's interesting that they're magical. Not sure what that means. I think that's thrown in there as a part of the story, just to say like they're still in tune, they can still play them. Maybe Tolkien is like,
right. In other words, you're not going to be able to play a harp that's been sitting for hundreds of years.
Yeah, right.
Otherwise,
I don't think there's anything more special than that about the word magical in there. Tolkien just threw it in.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that like the elves, the dwarves, when they create, we're told in the beginning that dwarves make magical toys that do all kinds of things that they sold to the men of Dale, and they brought across Middle Earth to sell to other people, and so they have an ability to craft things which have an enduring quality and can do things that normal materials can't. Probably from their nature. From their nature.
Maybe these could be elven harps too. Let's talk a minute, since we're on the idea of the films too. Let's talk a minute about the Arkenstone and how it was shown in films. In the films, it's this sort of globulous thing, a little misshapen, not perfectly round, clearly uncut. But Tolkien makes the point that this is something that the dwarves crafted, right? It is from the mountain, but the dwarves did actually cut and craft it. And I think that speaks to who the dwarves are, rather than just leaving it as a glob of stone that they pulled out of the mountain that had these. I still hate the way that they had the tendrils of light always coming out of it, like some sort of wand from Harry Potter. It felt amateurish, like they didn't know what to do, as opposed to like trying to create light that came out of it, like giving it a light on the inside, but when there's light from the outside, right, it radiates with 1,000 sparkles that come out of it, the rainbow of 1,000 sparkles, something like that. And I just missed that. When I saw the Arkenstone, it disappointed me in the films too. It just felt sort of like a video game object, not an actual, like something that the dwarves would have created.
Yeah, what is that urge? It's to try to. So Tolkien talks about it having light coming from within it, and he talks very specifically about the multicolored sparkles and such. So they could have just done that.
Mm-hmm.
So what's that urge then to just make it different? I mean, we see it all over the place in the Hobbit movie, terribly, in fact. This is less terrible because they're just trying to show light emitting, and they do it like wisping light, which is, supposed to be a kind of eye candy. I think you're right. It's kind of video game-ish. But the fact that you have a stone emitting light in the first place should be impressive enough, and the multicolored, multifaceted sparkling that it does should be. I mean, that they could have just leaned into that, but no, always got to do their own thing and
recreate it in their own image.
Yeah, it didn't bother me, I think, as much as it bothered you, but I see it as that sort of knee-jerk or artistic desire to take somebody else's work and like make it different.
Yeah.
So when you put it on the screen or on the stage, So it does tell us something about the size. It is interesting that Tolkien is he doesn't give us a lot of details about specifics most of the time, like how people are dressed and stuff. But whenever it comes to gemstones, Tolkien always, and precious things, precious metals, he has this tendency to be more specific than before. So he talks about the dwarves took down mail and weapons from the walls and armed themselves royal indeed did Thorin look, clad in a coat of gold-plated rings, with a silver hafted axe in a belt crusted with scarlet stones. So Tolkien's painting a really clear picture. So he's got rubies on his belt, scarlet stones or some kind of scarlet stones, gold-plated rings. So he's got ring mail armor that's gold-plated, and a silver hafted axe. And then when it describes what he gives to Bilbo, he says it was silver steel, this coat of mail, which the elves call mithril. And with it went a belt of pearls and crystals. A light helm of figured leather, strengthened beneath with hoops of steel, and studded about the brim with white gems, was set upon the hobbit's head. So he gets real specific about the description of armor and weapons, and especially when they're adorned with precious metals and precious stones. He paints a more specific picture for us, and as he does with the Arkenstone. So Tolkien was just fascinated. I think Tolkien was fascinated by this, and I remember it kind of increasing. Like, I loved it as a kid. Like, the description of different precious stones and precious metals and arms and armor was awesome, and I could picture it in my head. And I was glad he gave us more details about that.
It creates the world much more clearly, I think, just by having the world populated by specific little things as opposed to grand visions. These specific visions give it a flavor that makes it feel real. And it's not just there were, large armories with beautiful coats of mail in it. No, there were very specific things, and I think that's why he does it. But I think he also likes that, because by adding these distinct details, it gives a story to the armor that we don't know about yet either. And I think that's what makes the world richer. So, I think it's funny that Bilbo got tired of examining the treasures, though, eventually.
Yep. What pulls him away? Food, of course.
Food. Plus, he knows he's got the best treasure anyway. He would have traded that one treasure for all the rest of it anyway, and he's got it in his pocket. So maybe that plays a part of it. But I think it's the food. I would give a good many of these precious goblets he thought for a drink of something cheering out of one of Bjorn's wooden bowls. It's the bag inside his back. He wants his food.
Yeah, and specifically, the beginning of that paragraph I liked. It says, all the same, Mr. Baggins kept his head more clear of the bewitchment of the horde than the dwarves did. So the horde is in fact bewitching. There is an effect that the horde is having upon them. I would argue, as you did earlier, that it has an effect on Bilbo, which is probably, in my opinion, why he steals the Silmaril. Sorry, the Arkenstone.
Yeah, we'll talk about the extended podcast, boys.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, so it's interesting.
So let me ask you. Well, let me ask you this here. Let me just. So they are bewitched by the treasure. When they lived there, were they also bewitched by the treasure? Or is this something that happens? Does absence make the heart grow more bewitched?
There's a third possibility. It could be that first of all, it could be that, yes, the dwarves were in fact in a perpetual state of low-grade bewitchment.
Sorry,
so
that sounds like a disease that Pfizer would have to be there.
It's like
you
alcohol.
Have a perpetual state of low grade.
If you live drinking, like in the Middle Ages, everyone, including kids, drank alcohol. It was safer than water much of the time, and so there was a funny paper that I heard delivered when I was in my PhD program by someone who basically used that line, like that most in many areas of England, the people of the 14th century just lived in a perpetual state of low-grade drunkenness. Where you have so much alcohol in your system then, or small amounts of alcohol. So maybe that's what the effect, like the dwarves, because but they clearly hoard the treasure, right? The dragon doesn't have a lot of ability to really predict. Like, imagine the mechanics after the dragon kills the dwarves of Erebor of trying to get all their gold. If you presume either the gold was hoarded below in the cellars or it was not, it was spread around. I have a hard time imagining a dragon being able to actually gather up heaps of gold from all over in these tiny passages, because it can only fit in certain places in Erebor anyway. So clearly the dwarves are hoarding it. That's the logical conclusion in my mind anyway. So I think that's an example of their bewitchment and how they maybe are tied to treasure as a kind of, it has that kind of effect. And maybe the more of it there is, the worse the effect is. Also, though, possibility number 2, they're bewitched because they're so desperate to get it back. So it's their desire coming across, halfway across the world from the Blue Mountains to here in order to win their treasure back. And so maybe it has that effect on them. But that second possibility, I think, is less likely, because we see that the treasure has a bewitching effect on Bilbo, but he doesn't ever have that desire. He joined the mission without that desire. So I'm led to believe third possibility, which it does give some credence to the initial impulse of Peter Jackson, which is that dragons have an effect when they dwell a long time upon treasure. And we even have a couple hints about that. So the dragon can, in fact, be a cause of some bewitchment. So
we need to put a pin in this.
Column A and column B. What?
Yeah, I agree. We need to put a pin in this and kind of remember about this when we talk about Nargothrond and Glaurung and Turin, and because it's going to be similar in a way. It'll be really interesting reading that, knowing that he was probably thinking about that when he was writing about Smaug.
Oh, that's a good point.
When we come to it, because he does bewitch a lot there, right? The entire, all his captives are essentially bewitched.
True.
As they're led out by the orcs. It's kind of a conversation that could never end. We could talk about how much is bewitchment, how much is their greed, how much is their heart, because clearly they come back and want it so badly that they have no plan. So they're in some way bewitched by it when they're not with it.
That's one of the better explanations I can think of for why they would go on the journey.
Yeah. But it wasn't bewitched yet by the dragon when they went on the journey. So perhaps, the dragon offers a deeper magic to it, a deeper greed to it, a deeper longing for it than they may have had before. Anyway, good conversation. It's going to make me think about it even more.
Yep. I don't know if you had any other things. I had 2 more things to mention about this chapter.
Go for it. Crom, yes.
When I was a kid, I said cram, but that's such an American pronunciation. This is an Englishman writing a book, and the word is specifically an Elvish word, so I can't imagine the elves of Middle-earth saying cram. So it's probably crom. So it's an Elvish word. It's basically compressed bread. Think of like probably military rations and things like that, which Tolkien might have got the reference from, who knows, but, or at least invented it. He notes that it keeps good indefinitely, is supposed to be sustaining, and is certainly supposed to be sustaining, like that, and is certainly not entertaining, being in fact very uninteresting except as a chewing exercise. So
that's such a great way of saying it. It's something you have to do and don't want to do, but you gotta do it anyway.
It's a way to make food horrible or boring, not horrible, but boring. And so it was a long journey food made by the Lakemen, but it was an elvish food, which leads me to think that the Lakemen, if they make it, but the word comes as an elvish word, then probably it comes from like the how to make it came from the elves.
Yeah.
Especially because it's supposed to be made of often containing honey and milk,
which is very elvish. Yeah.
Which has hints of lembas to it, which were another elvish bread that is described to us. But obviously, this is very much lesser than lembas. The other thing I wanted to mention was this whole. It is a weird passage to me, because they get to this dwarvish outpost that they decide like it's the safest place they can stay because they want to get far away from the mountain, but they want to still be able to see the mountain. So this old dwarvish outpost they can see the mountain from, and they say, or Thorin said, or no, rather not Thorin, Balin says, there were several places like it round the mountain. This is a guard room, but seemed small need for watching in the days of our prosperity, and the guards were made over comfortable, perhaps. Otherwise, we might have had longer warning of the coming of the dragon, and things might have been different. Still, here we can now lie hid and sheltered for a while and can see much without being seen. That line, otherwise we might have had longer warning of the coming of the dragon, that seems ridiculous. Like, if you have an outpost that's like a few miles from the mountain, if you had dwarves there, presumably they would have some way of notifying, like they would have to send runners or something. Maybe they would have some sort of fire signals that they could let airborne know. But at the most, that's going to give you like 10 minutes warning that the dragon's coming. Like you're going to see the dragon's flying. It's flying to Erebor. Like what good is like 10 minutes warning if they can send fire signals or something? I just don't. I don't think this is a realistic take by Balin. I think it's more of an old dwarf complaining about how the complacency of the dwarves of his youth, and he's more giving a lesson than being realistic, because I think that's not completely unrealistic. But anyway.
I agree with that. Although I think 10 minutes preparing an army, you got 10 minutes to spare in a nighttime attack, right? That could be worth a lot. Maybe
sure,
the dwarves were
but that's assuming quite a bit. Like they see a dragon coming, they're certain it's a dragon from a long way off, and then it rushes, and then they set about signaling that there's a dragon coming somehow. Mm-hmm. Like supposedly they have a way to communicate over miles of distance, complex ideas like dragon. So, and then the people were there to receive it, and then that gives them like 5 or 10 minutes while the dragon flies in a direct line to the front.
It would have made more sense had they said like there was a giant gate, or had Tolkien written like there was a giant gate that wasn't lowered or something along those lines,
right?
That we could have blocked the entire entrance to the dragon. You would
I guess that's
hold out against.
Yeah,
but
anyway,
they didn't. So
I don't buy it from Balin.
But I agree. I think it's like it's him saying like, we would have been able to do something had we just had a little more time. Tell you, we would have been able to do it, right?
They've been more vigilant if they hadn't fallen. I mean, you get a little bit of the biblical warnings about falling asleep on duty when you're supposed to be watching for the bridegroom, and it's the opposite, right? It's a bad thing you're supposed to be watching for, the thief in the night, I guess. So I just get the sense of like old cranky dwarf complaining about like, if they'd only been on their toes a little more, we would have had a chance. Like, no, dude, you're not going to have a chance against Smaug. Smaug was going to come and wreck everything.
Yeah, agreed. I have one other thing to bring up, and that is the Gem of Girion. Did you read about that at all? Did you hear about see
No,
that?
I did not.
So the Gem of Girion, this is a history of the Hobbit, where as we go through this, I've never read that incredibly detailed book about everything that's gone on in the Hobbit and how Tolkien edited it and his notes. And histories and how it's connected to other things. It's 1,500 pages. We're on about page 900 now. I'm sure there's a few hundred pages of indexes and appendices that I'm not including here, or that I am including in the 1,500. However, he makes the point that I'm just going to read straight what he said about this here. The Gem of Girion. In the original conception, the Gem of Girion is so named because it was given by Girion, king of Dale, who, of course, Bard is a descendant of that, to the dwarves of the Lonely Mountain in payment for the arming of his sons. We are never told how it came into Girion's possession. And just as a new character had to be introduced to fill the role of Dragonslayer once Tolkien decided it strained credulity to have little Bilbo in that role. That's a hint that originally Bilbo was going to play a larger part in the slaying of Smaug. Bard, whom Tolkien economically made the heir of Girion, thus opening up new plot threads and possibilities even as he resolved one issue. So too, the elevation of the Gem of Girion into the Arkenstone. So originally, in his original, there was no Arkenstone in his first draft. There was just the Gem of Girion. It led to the Arkenstone. It led to the introduction of the Necklace of Girion, which they talked about earlier.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, to assume some of the plot elements no longer suitable for the original item as it had evolved. For example, it is no more plausible that a human king would surrender a wonder like the Arkenstone for his son and heir's armor, however finely wrought, than that Gollum's grandmother gave away rings of power as a birthday present. And the stories had to be changed to match the later conceptions. It is interesting, given the other echoes of the old Naglfring, or Nauglamir, as we know it in the Silmarillion, the Naglfring story in this cluster of chapters, that having split the Gem of Girion into two items, Tolkien chose to make this new item a necklace, since the Naglfring itself had combined a wondrous necklace with a fabulous gem. So there's, you can see, like, I just love that you can see the interweaving of what he had already created in the history of Middle-earth into the Hobbit, though not making it the same thing, right? He loved his stories of old, but he's weaving it into here. And even we can see that with the Arkenstone, where he's weaving the Silmaril into this story here too. Probably because he thought, like, well, I'll never be able to get to tell these stories here because they're my stories and I'm never going to be able to finish them. Maybe he thought one day he would, but he does. He weaves them into the Hobbit. So that's, originally there was no Arkenstone. There was the Gem of Girion that was going to be given. I changed it into the necklace of Girion to assume those same sort of plot elements about giving and taking the treasure of the King of Dale. Anyway, okay. That is all I got.
Very cool.
We are on to the final destruction of Smaug, next chapter, the fire and water.
We get to hear how a big bird gets taken down by a small bird.
I like that. We might actually do the whole chapter again next time. It's not that long and kind of concentrates on one thing.
Let's do it.
So, guys, we're going to get into our extended podcast. Go to thewonder.com/member to become a member and get the podcast. Eventually, you will be able to get the app. We're looking at November. We're looking at October, I hope, unless things push it into November. But yeah, you'll get an app. You'll be able to get the podcast there. You'll be able to get into the chats from there too. So become a member, thewonder.com/member, and get our extended podcast, which we're going into right here.
Bye, freeloaders.